Having worked with so many people over these last 6 to 12 months, coming in from all over the country to Fort Collins, Colorado, one thing that I've found is maybe Fort Collins might not necessarily be the exact fit for them, but the surrounding areas in northern Colorado might be. And as we discussed in previous videos, what is northern Colorado? Well, specifically it's Larimer and Weld County, comprised of the bigger cities of Greeley, Loveland, Fort Collins, Berthoud, Johnstown, Tibnis, Severance, and Windsor. So we explore those boundaries, and one of the things that I know very well with myself is I don't go south of Berthoud. I recently had a referral client that I actually declined, a friend of mine, that I really just wasn't gonna be able to help them. They were looking to buy in Longmont, and for me, that was just a little bit too far south. I keep myself here in northern Colorado. I've got rentals in Greeley, bought my first house in Loveland, and still have some rentals in Loveland. The majority of my property is in Fort Collins, Colorado. It's where I was born and raised, and everything except for 9 months out of my life have lived. So I find myself very able and capable to help people, accommodate them for all their real estate needs here in northern Colorado. And if you're new to the channel, hey, please consider subscribing. And if at the end of this content or this video, if you've enjoyed the content, give it a thumbs up, comment, engage, and interact. What today's video is going to be about is the pros and cons of living in northern Colorado. I have done a video specifically for Fort Collins, but this is going to be kind of more specific to northern Colorado. So we're going to hint on some things about Greeley, Loveland, Fort Collins, Red Feather, and Estes Park to help you understand the area a little bit better. Because again, once I've worked with as many people as I have, Fort Collins is awesome, and you can drive here truly within 30 to 45 minutes tops, really all within northern Colorado. We are centrally located within that northern Colorado area. So whether you're west to Estes, north to Red Feather, east to Greeley, or south to Loveland, really within 15 to 30 minutes, you can find yourself back to Fort Collins. So these surrounding areas in northern Colorado could be a home for you. So enjoy the video of today, pros and cons of living in northern Colorado. And hey, as much as I like making these real estate videos for YouTube, we like more working with buyers, sellers, and investors for all their real estate needs here in northern Colorado. So if you're interested in relocating here to northern Colorado, send me a text, email, give me a call, whatever works for you. I've got your back when it comes to living in northern Colorado. Without any further delay, let's jump in to the cons, pros, cons of living in northern Colorado. Enjoy. All right, let's start with the cons and get the crappy stuff out of the way, but also something for you to understand that if you can get through these cons and to the pros, well, maybe northern Colorado could fit what you're looking at doing. And specifically, I think the first thing to address is the weather. Working with people from Florida and the Northeast and California, I've heard the gambit. You know, our summers are better than the Californian summers. Actually just heard that today. Florida, I mean, the only fun months to live there are potentially the winter months. Now, I'm sure that could be an exaggeration, but when you're talking about the humidity and different things about maintenance of the house that I didn't realize, well, it understands that weather could actually cause just as much harm, if not more potentially, than some of the weather that we have here. And then living in kind of the Chicago area, when you're looking at the winds, the humidity, how cold it is, how long the snow can last, northern Colorado's weather, you know, it stacks up with them. So they're all curious about different aspects. And I would say east of I-25, our winds are gonna be there. In my 32 years here on this earth, I have seen, not personally seen, but heard about a tornado in Windsor. It was pretty devastating, quite a bit of destruction. It's the only tornado that I've ever seen here. The biggest pieces of weather that we're gonna have is going to be wind, hail, which we've discussed, but can absolutely do some damage, so make sure that you have garage to park in. Snow, well shoot, we just had a 2 foot dumping, and that's gonna happen every 9 to 15 years. So it gets out of your memory, but then shoot, within 24 to 36 hours, dumps 2 feet of snow. It'll quickly remind you that you do live along the foothills. And then also it's a dry climate. So if my wife specific, she loves the humidity for her skin. She doesn't get, cracking or anything like that by any means, but she definitely dries out. And so she, for her skin and for her hair, loves more of the humid climate. So here in Fort Collins, our climate is definitely more dry. And the last piece of weather that is a con is we do have freezing temperatures. When I got married in January of 2017, I'll never forget it. It was negative 17 degrees. Pipes were bursting, cleaning up flooding basements. And again, we had that this year. Fortunately, not too much freezing pipes, but it did get in those low negatives. I don't know if it reached negative in the teens, but it was double-digit negatives, and it just sucks. Honestly, like the day to week long that is, and that's really all it will be, is probably 1 to 3 days of those negative temperatures, but it seems like a lifetime, and it does suck. So it happens every about 2 to 3 years, but if it does happen, be prepared for it, dress warm, stay inside, and keep the heat on, pipes, your faucets dripping, cabinets open, all the good stuff to mitigate and hedge against frozen pipes. So the con number 1 is all the different weather that we do have to deal with that's specific here to Northern Colorado. The second con, those winds are gonna push some smells our way along the foothills. The smell of Greeley. Well, we do have a humongous operation in JBS that's a beef operation there. And the feedlots can go for, actually I calculated it, I was 1.5 miles worth of feedlots. And I don't know how far back it went to the north, but heading east, it was 1.5 miles worth of feedlots that were operated by JBS. That smell, it's gotta go somewhere. I don't necessarily feel like you can smell it too bad in Greeley. It almost like jumps. That weather and that wind pushes it. And as you're driving across I-25, you'll kind of make this bend around Johnstown, and you will take a big whiff and be like, babe, come on, if you're gonna fart, roll down the window. And it's just joking because you know that it's Greeley that you're smelling. So number 2, the smell of Greeley is definitely something that's unique. As my folks and family back in Waukon, it's the smell of money. So if you can look at optimistically, the smell of money, Greeley, that strong backbone economy, and JBS is making its way to I-25. Fortunately, it doesn't really jump I-25. I don't really smell it in Fort Collins, but the smell of Greeley is definitely strong some days. Number 3, Weld County is one of the most profitable counties in the United States. From oil and gas, its taxes and revenue that it generates supplies a very flourishing county economy. That being said, you are going to have to be okay with oil rigs and drills that dot the highway, the interstate, that dot US 34, that are a part of that economy. There are some in Larimer County, don't get me wrong, specifically a neighborhood and subdivision called Hearthfire. There are plenty of people that won't live in this neighborhood because literally it is $1 million neighborhood. And as you drive in, there is oil drilled to your left and oil drilled to your right, and that is on the drive in. And Weld County definitely has quite a bit more oil drills and rigs that dot the county, but supply it an extraordinary tax base, which is very interesting to see Weld County and Boulder County butt up. There is truly a road that you can drive down and look to your left if you're heading south, and your right if you're heading south. In Boulder County, Weld County, oil rigs galore, nothing. This one road separates that. So that's something that you are going to have to kind of comes to grips with, if that's where you're wanting to live, is in northern Colorado, that Weld County has a strong oil and gas base. Larimer County has some as well, but living not necessarily next to, well, in Weld County you could absolutely live next to. I was going to look at a house with my wife, and it was $1 million property on 7 acres. And as you walk out the front door, there's an oil operation right there. And I mean, I understand it has to happen and you need to have it for a strong economy. And yeah, we're making this transition to EV vehicles. However you dice it, we are still oil dependent. But I don't want to look out at an oil drill or rig from my house unless I own it. And I do not own any oil rigs or drills. So no oil rigs or drills for me when I go out the front door. So that house was absolutely off the books for us. But for some, it's okay. And they're okay living there because it fits a lot of their other desires and needs. But I would have to say that's definitely a con for Weld and Larimer County. Understand that coming in and when you're looking. Our last 2 cons can be kind of determined by our population growth. As I've told you guys, I'm working with many individuals moving into Fort Collins, and we are working with folks from all over the country. Well, that population of 1.5% to 2% growth, probably closer to 1.5% than 2% these days, because we're getting closer to that 200,000 person threshold in Fort Collins. But I've also talked to you about what that population growth looks like in Larimer and Weld County, is what is driving these second 2 cons, which is our housing and our traffic. Traffic is absolutely something that locals here are not used to. We're used to being able to fly down I-25 or across Harmony Road to Timnath or Carpenter to Windsor, US 34, no issues, but really, truly, we are just not used to it. So perspective is key. I would have to say every conversation that I have with an individual coming in from out of state that is from a bigger metro, when I tell them that it's gonna take you 15 or 20 minutes to get from the southeast side of Fort Collins to the northeast, or 45 minutes from Fort Collins to all the way to East Greeley, you know, they kind of laugh. That's just okay. That's standard quo for them. So when I posed a question to my Instagram community, what is the least favorite thing you like about Northern Colorado? The majority of the answers was traffic. And I had to put it in the video so that if you're coming from a small community, which I was talking to somebody from Georgia today, and they're coming from a much smaller community where their high school graduates 90 people a year, to Fort Collins, traffic might be an issue. So it's definitely something worth discussing. I-25 is being widened about 10 years behind schedule, not schedule, but behind of where it should have been. And 34 and Highway 14 are not congested, but highly traveled roads. So be aware, be understanding that traffic is definitely something that we have here in Northern Colorado. And finally, our last con, housing. Part 1, part 2 of housing. Part 1 is metro districts. It's a special taxing district that these developers have began using very highly to be able to afford these developments. Specifically, they raise the mill levy taxes, and it does have a cap, but you could expect really probably a 30 to 40% increase in the mill levy for your property taxes. And this goes to pay for gutters, sidewalks, landscaping, sprinklers, maintenance, everything that a development needs infrastructure-wise for it to be a successful operation. But the cost of that is your increased property taxes. In Fort Collins, we don't have too many developments with metro districts. But when you're looking in Johnstown, Windsor, Timnath, Greeley, Severance, you're gonna come up against metro districts. And it's something to take into consideration as it does increase rather dramatically your annual living expense. So if you want more information about metro districts or what those implications are, definitely feel free to reach out to me or my buddy Connor. You know, he's a fellow agent of mine with Soukup Real Estate and really kind of dug into what the dynamics are. And there are good metro districts and there are some not so good metro districts. So pay close attention to developments of where you're buying, which then kind of the housing prices themselves. Take into consideration Fort Collins property taxes without metro districts are really pretty affordable in comparison to what I've seen in the Midwest and even the Southeast, Northeast, and California. As well as our insurance. Now, our insurance has ticked up substantially so. I actually just got a 25% increase on some of my insurance on some of my properties, and it's due in large part to con number one, our hail. They have to offset some of those costs when the premiums aren't covering all of the costs. So the premiums have to go up. But in general, our insurance premiums really aren't too bad. You could look at a $450,000 newer construction home and your insurance premium is going to be anywhere from $2,250 to $3,000 depending on your liability limits and things of that nature. Well, talking to some folks in Florida, for that same type of insurance, they could see anywhere from $6,000 to $7,000 a year in property insurance. So when I talk to you about the cost of housing for our prices, median sales price in Fort Collins, $475,000, Timnath exceeded $500,000, Greeley a little bit less expensive in the lower upper threes as far as a median price point, and Loveland's going to exceed $400,000. So our expense to buy a house is there. It is expensive. But the ancillary costs, property taxes and insurance, generally speaking, if you're not in a metro district specifically, are relatively affordable. So take that into consideration. Yes, 10 years ago, median sales price was upper twos. Today, it's mid fours. We've doubled in 10 years, almost. The population growth has pushed our demand and our prices up. So it's something to take into consideration. If you're looking at buying a house, keep that in mind because it is expensive to buy, but sometimes less expensive to operate in the form of maintenance, taxes, and insurance. So if you made it this far, through all the cons, in Northern Colorado is still a possible place for you to relocate to. Let's get into what the pros are of living here in Northern Colorado. And I'd have to start with living along the foothills. We don't live in the mountains like you would in Utah, or in the Northeast having to be right up next to the mountains to see them. But we live along the foothills and have phenomenal views all the way east of Windsor. Now, you do need to be careful about buying a house in a newer development or a developing area because just because today you have a view of the mountains doesn't mean that in 5 to 10 years, there's not gonna be a new development with a higher elevation property that cuts that view off. So there's something to be taken into consideration for a more developed, established neighborhood, comparatively a newer, but if you are looking for views of the mountain and enjoy the majesty of sunsets, Northern Colorado is definitely one of those places that you're gonna enjoy going. Which, from a video of my 5 favorite things to do in Fort Collins, 300 days of sun is really what helps our snow melt after getting jacked with 2 feet of snow, or allows you to go play golf in November, December, January, 50-degree days. I've talked with my grandpa who golfed, I think it was 250 days of the year one year, and you truly can do that. Now granted, there's gonna be some days where there's wind, but if you're committed to it, you can do it. And that's due to our high amount of days with the sun shining. And with that sun shining, you're gonna wanna take advantage of all the biking and outdoor activities that you can find in Northern Colorado, all the way up to Red Feather, to Laurie State Park, Loveland's Devil's Backbone, Rattlesnake Trail, and east into Greeley and Windsor, along the Poudre. You're gonna find opportunities to find yourself outdoor, enjoying those 300 days of sun along those trails and activities that Northern Colorado is really finding itself to be a pioneer on, focusing on the outdoor activities and lifestyle. That biking and walking trails all over Northern Colorado is absolutely one of the best things that we've got going. And when you're finding yourself on these bike trails, go check out Weldworks, the breweries here in Northern Colorado, or New Belgium Odell's, Rock Bottom Brewery. Now granted, that's a little bit more corporate, or High Hops in Windsor, which has this garden, outdoor patio right off Main Street, or Big Beaver Brewing in Loveland that's a little bit more local than Rock Bottom. But as with a lot of smaller localities, tertiary cities, so to speak, and tertiary areas, the brewing is absolutely something that everybody's hopped on board with, but Colorado, Northern Colorado is definitely the kingpin when it comes to craft brews. And like I said, from WeldWorks, High Hops, and Big Beaver Brewing outside of Fort Collins, and then of course Odell's in New Belgium. You can find yourself riding your bike dang near to each one of those if you really wanted to. And Northern Colorado's housing prices that we talked about in the cons is really stabilized by University of Northern Colorado and Colorado State University, two Division I schools that supply housing, jobs, student enrollment, and a plethora of ancillary opportunities with the foundation in second-tier universities. I don't foresee these going anywhere anytime soon, so Fort Collins and Greeley having a backbone in university education supplies the housing market an extremely strong, stable foundation. So yes, we have we do have high prices for homes, but we do have these economies and foundations that are going to support them now and moving into the future, which then leads me into the diverse economies of, the beef industry in Greeley, to the agriculture in Loveland, and then Fort Collins, really growing, but has its foundation in CSU and government in Larimer County and city of Fort Collins and healthcare. But then this kind of fledgling tech scene that's making its way up. All of these economies, although they do have strong economy bases, Greeley, oil, gas, beef, Loveland, in agriculture and different technology scenes and operations, smaller businesses, and then Fort Collins all over the place. They are diversified. They're not so heavily focused with such a high population that's employed by one or two employers that if it goes out, the economy crumbles, i.e. Detroit, or things like that are great when things are going good, but very bad if things go south. It's something that I really enjoy having here in Northern Colorado. And our last two pros are going to be probably the two most exciting things about Northern Colorado. With the population growth comes new opportunities. Commercial always follows residential rooftops. And with the population growing and the economies growing at what rate they are, businesses and entrepreneurs are finding themselves bringing different opportunities, ideas, centers, and again, ideas to Northern Colorado. We have amazing developers that have their roots here in Northern Colorado, whether it's Martin Lind or Les Kaplan, Pat Stryker, she's not a developer, but a philanthropist throwing money in good areas, and plenty of other developers that do deserve high praise for their forward thinking, the McQuinneys here in Northern Colorado that are shaping our landscape and providing ideas and opportunities that the population growth and vibrant economy affords us. So yes, we do have this extremely fast growing population, but with that comes fun opportunities and exciting new ventures for us that have been born and raised here. And for you that might be coming to visit or live and enjoy. So definitely new growth equals new developments and new opportunities. But we still have our roots in this safe, secure, family-friendly economy and region. People find themselves coming back to Northern Colorado to raise and live and bring up their families, whether it's Fort Collins, Windsor, Greeley, Loveland, Wellington, Severance, Timnath, you name it. It's in general a very safe, secure place. Yes, there are issues in maybe Northern Fort Collins or East Greeley or different areas, but that's gonna be the case everywhere. It's a matter about keeping that perspective and being aware. I had a great conversation. That was one of the conversations that we had today. This couple was from Georgia, a small community, but they have a gang issue. And I was just kind of taken aback. And yes, I would say we have to have some gang somewhere. I'm oblivious to it. I do think there might be some gang issues in Greeley, East Greeley. I don't know how well those are getting cleaned up. But we'll see some tagging here in Fort Collins. But in general, I feel completely 100% safe walking down, Loveland's Old Town or Fort Collins Old Town or Greeley, Windsor, and have my kid not close to my hip, but just right beside me, and not having my windows rolled up or our doors locked. It's just an area that we feel with the parks and the safe and lower crime rates that raising a family here is absolutely one of the best things that we could do. And for my wife, who sees Fort Collins as definitely a place where our diverse population lacks, which it does, the ability to raise a family the way that we can far outweighs and exceeds the downfall of the lack of diversity. Our diversity is going to come, it just will. It's a part of our social progression and acceptingness of mixed relationships and a lot of different things, people being able to relocate, lots of different things are going to cause our population to be more diverse. But the fact of how safe and fun and family friendly Northern Colorado is far outweighs any of those that might detract or cause us to potentially move. So Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, Loveland, Greeley, Windsor, family friendly pro #1. So there you have it, folks. The pros and cons of living in Northern Colorado. Weigh for yourself. What is more important? Some of the cons that I told you about, and there are others, sure, I might have missed some, but I feel like those are some of the most important. Or the pros that I hit on. Besides all the other things and reasons and wants and desires of you wanting to live here in Northern Colorado, those are some ideas of what's going on here in Northern Colorado that really makes it a vibrant place and a place that I love to call home. So again, as much as we like making these real estate videos, we like more working with buyers, sellers, and investors here in Northern Colorado. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel, commenting, engaging, interacting. Let me know what you think the best pros and cons are, or worst cons, best pros are here in Northern Colorado. Appreciate you guys watching. Until next time, take care.